In the high, cold silence of the Himalayas, there are places where the wind moves like a living thing and the sky stretches so close that it feels as though one can touch it. In these vast spaces, where the earth rises to meet the heavens, mysteries linger like ancient spirits. It is a land where legends breathe, where stories passed down through generations take on a strange closeness to the truth. Among all the mysteries that the Himalayas have held in their icy grasp, perhaps none has endured with as much tenacity as the question of the Yeti, the so-called abominable snowman. And no event in that entire saga is more iconic, more haunting, or more challenging to explain than the photographs taken by the British mountaineer Eric Shipton in 1951. Footprints, solitary and enormous, preserved in the untouched snow of Menlung Glacier. Footprints that have fascinated and perplexed researchers for more than 70 years. To understand why those footprints still matter today, we must go back not just to that single moment when the shutter of Shipton's camera clicked, but into the life and mind of the man himself. Eric Shipton was not the type of explorer who embellished stories or chased fame. He was a meticulous observer, respected for his honesty and caution. His colleagues admired him for his humility, a rare trait in the competitive world of early mountaineering. Before the world knew of his photographs, they knew him as the man who opened new pathways through terrains considered impossible. He had helped pioneer routes for expeditions seeking the summit of Everest, and he was known for preferring quiet exploration over glory. For this reason alone, when he came back with photographs of giant footprints, the world paid attention. If Shipton said he saw something, he had truly seen it. The events of November 1951 unfolded under harsh conditions. Shipton and his companion, the New Zealand mountaineer Edmund Hillary, who 2 years later would stand on the summit of Everest, were on a mission to scout possible routes up the mountain's treacherous southwest face. Their expedition took them through terrain that few humans had ever crossed. The glaciers were wild, broken, and full of hidden dangers. Crevasses open like the jaws of ancient beasts. The snow could swallow a man without warning, and in the middle of that isolation, surrounded by nothing but ice and sky, the team stumbled upon tracks that would become part of the legend of the Himalayas. The footprints were enormous, each one far larger than any human foot. Shipton knelt beside one, studying it with the precision of a scientist. 5 clear toes, a broad heel, an impression deep enough to suggest great weight. The prints followed a line that was almost unnervingly straight, crossing a slope and then climbing over broken ice with an ease no human could achieve. That was what first puzzled Shipton, not just the size of the footprints, but the fact that the creature, whatever it was, had walked upright across dangerous terrain with a long stride. Bears do not walk like that. No known Himalayan animal leaves a print with 5 distinct toes in that pattern. And so Shipton did what any explorer would do. He photographed the prints, placing his ice axe beside one to show its scale. That photograph has since become one of the most iconic images ever taken in the field of cryptozoology. It is sharp, clear, and unsettling in its simplicity. When Shipton returned to base and showed the prints to the Sherpas who accompanied the expedition, they reacted not with disbelief but with familiarity. To them, the tracks were simply confirmation of something they had always known. High in the mountains lived a creature that avoided human contact but left behind traces of its presence. To the Sherpas and Tibetans, the Yeti was neither a myth nor a metaphor. It was part of the living landscape, like the wind or the snow. They had names for it: Migoi, Matokan, stories that described its strength, its elusiveness, and the way it could move across the mountains faster than any man. One of the men who examined the prints was Tenzing Norgay, a Sherpa who had grown up among these legends. Later he would summit Everest with Hillary, but in 1951 he was already an experienced mountaineer with countless stories of strange encounters in the mountains. He had heard deep, haunting cries echoing across valleys at night. He had seen figures moving in the distance at altitudes where no ordinary human could survive for long. When he saw Shipton's photographs, he did not hesitate. He said the prints looked like those of the Yeti, not because he wanted to believe in a myth, but because they matched the descriptions passed down for generations among his people. With the publication of Shipton's photographs, the Western world found itself caught in a wave of fascination. Newspapers featured the images on their front pages. Scientists debated the possibilities. Could a large species of primate have survived unnoticed in the Himalayas? Could the Yeti be related to Gigantopithecus, the massive ape species believed to have lived in Asia until a few 100,000 years ago? Some researchers entertained the idea that a relict hominid, perhaps a close cousin of early humans, had managed to survive in the most isolated mountains on the planet. Others argued that the prints were distorted bear tracks. Still others claimed they were the creation of locals seeking to entertain Western explorers. Yet every explanation seemed incomplete. The shape was too precise, the stride too consistent, the terrain too dangerous for any known animal to cross in that manner. As the decades passed, countless expeditions followed in Shipton's footsteps. Some came back with plaster casts of footprints, though none as clear as the originals. Others reported finding hair samples or scat that could not be immediately identified. Several expeditions brought back stories of large figures seen at night, of camps ransacked, of stones thrown from cliffs by unseen hands. One monk from a remote monastery described a creature that walked upright and moved silently despite its size. And in the Pangbush Monastery, explorers found what became known as the Pangbush Handan artifact, believed by monks to be the skeletal remains of a Yeti. Its discovery sparked another wave of controversy, analysis, smuggling attempts, and scientific debate. Some researchers who examined the bones said they seemed humanoid, others insisted they belonged to monkeys. The truth remained elusive. Modern scientific analyses have not settled the matter. Several DNA studies have been conducted on hair samples claimed to belong to the Yeti. Some were identified as belonging to bears, Himalayan brown bears, or Tibetan blue bears, to be precise. But others defied classification. A particularly enigmatic result came from hair found in Ladakh and Bhutan, which some researchers argued belonged to an unknown bear-like species, while others suggested it may be linked to an ancient, extinct lineage. Even when samples are identified as bear, that does not fully explain Shipton's footprints. Bears do not leave five-toed prints of such clarity while walking upright for long distances. And so, the question endures. What did Shipton really see? To answer that, we must consider the unique nature of the Himalayas. The mountain range covers an enormous area, full of remote valleys, unexplored ridges, and dense forests, where no human has ever set foot. Even today, satellites cannot fully map the terrain. There are countless caves, crevices, and ice fields where a species could remain undetected for centuries. The climate and altitude require enormous adaptability, something that a hypothetical hominid or primate species might have developed over millions of years. There are also regions of the Himalayas considered sacred, where locals believe spirits walk. In these places, the cultural understanding of the Yeti merges with a spiritual worldview. The creature is seen not only as an animal, but as a guardian of the mountains, a being that lives between the physical and the mystical. Shipton himself was careful not to claim that he had discovered the Yeti. He merely stated what he saw and photographed. He remained open to multiple interpretations, but he never dismissed the possibility that the tracks were real. His honesty and humility have led many to trust his account more than any other. Even Edmund Hillary, initially skeptical, later became fascinated by the mystery. He launched his own Yeti investigation in the 1960s, although he came away unconvinced, largely due to the questionable nature of relics shown to him. Yet even Hillary admitted that some accounts could not be easily explained. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Yeti mystery is that it sits at the crossroads of science and legend. Scientists propose evolutionary explanations. Local villagers speak of a creature that communicates with the mountain spirits. Mountaineers describe distant shapes and unexplainable sounds. And through all these perspectives, one thing remains constant: the sense that something exists, something we do not yet understand. The night in the Himalayas has a way of amplifying mystery. When darkness falls, the cold deepens and the silence becomes oppressive. The wind cries across the glaciers, and shadows move across the slopes with unsettling purpose. Those who have spent nights at high altitude speak of hearing noises unlike anything produced by known animals, deep resonant calls, rhythmic thumping, and sometimes the crunch of snow under heavy feet. These accounts, though anecdotal, contribute to a larger picture. The mountains are alive with sounds that cannot always be explained. One climber from a 1980s expedition described waking to the sound of something moving outside the tent. At first, he assumed it was the wind, but then he heard slow, deliberate steps circling the camp. The next morning they found large footprints in the fresh snow around the tent, leading off into the rocky slopes above. Another expedition reported stones being thrown at them from a cliffside, though no animals or people were in sight. Bears do not behave this way. Apes do not live at those altitudes. And humans, even the hardiest mountaineers, do not wander alone in the frozen wilderness in the middle of the night. There are even accounts from Soviet climbers in the Pamir Mountains far to the west, who claim to have seen large pidges moving across snowy ridges. Some of these climbers were highly trained professionals, not prone to hallucination or exaggeration. They described creatures nearly 2 meters tall, covered in dark hair, moving with astonishing speed and agility across slopes that would have killed a human. In one case, a group of military geologists in Siberia reported seeing a humanoid figure that left footprints similar to Shipton's. The description was eerily consistent: long stride, broad feet, clear toes. If we step back and analyze these reports collectively, a pattern emerges. The creature, whatever it might be, moves with purpose, avoids human settlements, and seems to inhabit the highest, most remote environments. It is elusive, not because it is supernatural, but because it lives in places we seldom go, and when we do, it watches us from a distance. There is also a biological argument to consider. Throughout history, many species once believed extinct or mythical have been discovered in remote regions. The okapi, the giant panda, the coelacanth, the mountain gorilla. Each of these animals was once dismissed as legend. Locals described them for generations, but Western scientists refused to believe until physical proof was found. The coelacanth, for example, was thought to have vanished 65 million years ago. Yet it resurfaced in 1938 off the coast of South Africa. The mountain gorilla, now one of the world's most iconic species, was considered mythical until explorers found undeniable evidence in the early 1900s. Could the Yeti be another such case? A species unknown to science, surviving in the most inhospitable terrain on Earth? This possibility becomes more intriguing when we revisit the footprints themselves. Several experts, including primatologists and forensic specialists, have examined Shipton's photographs in detail. Some have argued that the prints show characteristics of a primate foot, particularly the positioning of the big toe, which appears slightly divergent, similar to that of early hominids or large apes. Others note that the pressure ridges in the snow suggest an upright walker placing significant weight on the heel, a trait uncommon in quadrupedal animals. The stride length, too, is unusual. Based on the spacing between the prints, researchers estimate that the creature would have stood well over 6 feet tall, possibly closer to 7. Its gait suggests long legs and a strong stable core traits, consistent with a bipedal hominid, not a bear. And the uniformity of the prints across uneven terrain indicates a level of balance and mobility that would be extraordinary for a bear walking on 2 legs. Even so, skeptics argue that unusual snow conditions can distort prints. Melting wind and compression can create shapes that look artificial. But in Shipton's case, the prints were found at high altitude. In extremely cold temperatures, where melting was unlikely, the edges were sharp, the details clear. Snow distortion cannot fully account for the perfect imprint of 5 toes. Decades after Shipton, new footprints occasionally surfaced. Some show splayed toes, others deep heels, and a few nearly match the original photographs. While many of these prints can be attributed to environmental distortion or misidentification, a handful defy easy explanation. Scientists who review these cases often end up divided, with some willing to entertain the idea of an undiscovered species and others dismissing the prints as anomalies. In 2019, an Indian Army expedition photographed large footprints in the snow near Makalu Base Camp, not far from where Shipton took his photographs. The prints measured over 2 feet long and appeared in a single file line, as though a bipedal creature had passed through the area. The photographs caused a sensation online, though many critics insisted they belonged to a bear. Yet even skeptics admitted that the shape was unusual. The Yeti continues to hover between belief and disbelief, reality and legend. And this is where Shipton's photographs hold their true power. They capture a moment that forces us to confront the limits of our understanding. In a world where satellites map every corner of the globe and information spreads instantly, we like to believe that all great mysteries have been solved. But the footprints on Menlung Glacier remind us that there are still places on Earth where the unknown thrives. Perhaps the most compelling interpretation of the Yeti mystery comes from the people who live in the shadow of the Himalayas. For them, the creature is not a puzzle to be solved, nor a curiosity for foreign explorers. It is part of the natural world. They speak of the Yeti with respect, referring to it as a being that rarely harms humans unless disturbed. In some stories, it protects sacred places, preventing outsiders from trespassing where they do not belong. In others it wanders alone, a symbol of nature's indomitable power. From this perspective, Shipton's discovery takes on a different meaning. He did not find something unknown, he simply encountered something the locals had always believed in. His photographs acted as a bridge between two understandings of the world, the scientific and the spiritual. Today, the debate remains open. Researchers continue to explore remote valleys, analyze DNA samples, and review eyewitness accounts. But the Himalayas are changing. Climate shifts, tourism, and development are altering the landscape. Some fear that if a creature like the Yeti does exist, its habitat may be slowly disappearing, and with it, one of the greatest mysteries of the natural world. Yet perhaps the Yeti's power lies precisely in its elusiveness. In a time when science often demands proof before belief, the Yeti reminds us that wonder still has a place in our understanding of the world, that not everything can be neatly categorized or explained, that sometimes the most important mysteries are those that linger on the edge of possibility, inviting us to look deeper, to question, to explore. The footprints Shipton photographed remain a symbol of that mystery. They endure because they challenge us, because they whisper that the world is still vast, still wild, still capable of surprising us. And perhaps, somewhere high in the frozen reaches of the Himalayas, a creature walks in silence, leaving behind footprints that tell a story older than any legend, a story that Shipton captured in a single moment-to-moment that continues to echo across the decades, calling us to wonder. And maybe, just maybe, the truth still waits out there, hidden in the snow, watching from the peaks as we search for answers in the shadows of the world's highest mountains.